Hello, friends, family, and fellow bookworms, welcome back. Today I want to go through every single book that I read in the past month, in May, and I want to rank it from best to worst. So the first book on this list, the greatest book that I've read this month, and one of my favorite books of all time, it's actually a reread, The Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien. This was a book that I reread. It is one of my favorite books, if not my most favorite book of all time. I'm not going to say too much here because I do have a full review of this book coming up soon. So I did read this book because I've been working my way slowly through the History of Middle-earth series, which is a 12-volume series by Tolkien, edited by Christopher Tolkien. It's basically the history of how Tolkien wrote his books, so it has earlier drafts of those books, along with some commentary by Christopher Tolkien, who's J.R.R. Tolkien's son. And so the volumes that I'm about to dive into, volumes 10 through 11, go into the history of how Tolkien wrote this book, and so I figured I might as well refresh my memory on the Silmarillion before I start reading about how Tolkien wrote it. In short, this is a fantastic book. It is the complete history of Middle-earth, up from the very beginning all the way up to Frodo and the One Ring, and it's not a very easy read. It is a difficult read. I remember the first time I read it, I probably only grasped like 50% of it. Second time I read it, I understood it a little more. By the third time I had read it, I understood it enough to fully enjoy it, and I cannot recommend this book enough. Again, I do have a full review of this book coming up soon, so I won't say too much here, and stay tuned for that if you want to hear me talk more in depth about it. Which is this is one of my most favorite books of all time. And then next, I forgot to rank it. I'll give it 11 out of 10. Which I'm not sure if it's legal to give a book an 11 out of 10, but until someone tells me I can't, that's what I'm gonna do. And then, Perelandra by C.S. Lewis. This is the second book in the Space Trilogy. If you remember a month ago, I did talk about the first book in the trilogy, which is called Out of the Silent Planet. And Out of the Silent Planet, I gave a 10 out of 10. I think these books are even better than Narnia. Not, of course, that Narnia is bad, but these books are just so great. The second one did not disappoint. It was just as good as the first book. Basically, this story follows Elwyn Ransom as he goes to the planet Venus, which is actually called Perelandra. And Perelandra, or Venus, is basically like another Garden of Eden. It's very peaceful. There's no evil there at all. And the only inhabitants are a woman who is known by many names, but I'll call her Tinidril, which is one of her names. And then her husband, who is the king of Perelandra, and his name is Tor. So this Perelandra place is very peaceful. There's no evil. The sea, it's very warm there, and all the land masses float on the sea, except for a couple that are called the fixed land. And so God forbade the inhabitants of Perelandra from going onto the fixed land. But then, once Ransom comes to Perelandra, he's meant to expel some evil from it. And Satan comes there in the body of Ransom's former friend, Weston. And he talks to the woman and tries to tempt her to disobey what God told her about going on the fixed land. So he's trying to bring evil into Perelandra now. This book was really fascinating and way more direct in its theology than the first book. And it was just so good, really fascinating book. C.S. Lewis did a great job on it. And I'll give it a 10 out of 10. The next book on this list that I read this month is The Adventures of Tom Bombadil by J.R.R. Tolkien. So The Adventures of Tom Bombadil are a collection of 16 poems that Tolkien wrote, and it was published, this book was originally published in 1962, so this wasn't one of those books that was published posthumously. This one was actually published in Tolkien's lifetime. And so these 16 poems are about various things. So the first two are about Tom Bombadil and how he met Goldberry, and his relationship with the hobbits, how Tom Bombadil is a friend of Farmer Maggot, whom we meet in The Lord of the Rings. And then there's a couple other poems that are found in The Lord of the Rings, such as Sam's Oliphant poem. And then there's the Man in the Moon song that Frodo sings at the Prancing Pony when he accidentally slips the One Ring on. And then there are also a couple other poems. So a lot of these poems are very whimsical and delightful, but some of them are very serious, and one of them was creepy. It's called The Mew Lips, which was a absolutely creepy poem. And then the last 4 poems in this book are not very whimsical nor creepy. It's kind of hard to describe them, really. They are very serious, and some of them feel a bit sad, but at the same time joyous, and it's very hard to describe them, but you'll understand if you read them. So it's really incredible how Tolkien had such a way with words. Like, in this book, he goes from whimsical and delightful poems to very serious poems and beautiful lines that sound like they could have come out of the Iliad or the Bible or something. So Tolkien really was a master of words. But this book doesn't only have the poems. This book that I have here also has a commentary by Wang G. Hammond and Christina Scull, who are Tolkien experts. I understand that Christopher Tolkien also helped them. So this commentary in this edition was added after Tolkien's death. But the original poems were published in his lifetime. And the commentary just talks about how Tolkien wrote these poems. It has earlier drafts of these poems that Tolkien wrote. And it really shines light on all the small little hidden messages in the poems. There are also like little jokes and jests in all the poems, even the whimsical ones, even the serious ones, that are absolutely hilarious once you realize what they actually mean. But they're jokes that really only a philologist or a linguist would probably understand without reading the commentary. And I just love these poems so much. This was such a great read and such a fascinating read. I give this book my highest recommendation. If you've read The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, I definitely recommend this book. 9 out of 10. And then I have Quidditch Through the Ages by J.K. Rowling. Now this does take place. This is in the Harry Potter universe, of course. You know, the game of Quidditch that wizards play on broomsticks. And this book just talks about the history of Quidditch and how Quidditch began and how it evolved into what we know it from in the Harry Potter series. And this is really a fascinating book. It really adds a lot to the Harry Potter universe, and I really enjoyed this book. I really enjoyed my time with it. How the game of Quidditch was originally, or something very like Quidditch, was originally there in the 11th century, supposedly, of course. And how the game of Quidditch evolved from that time into what we know it from the Harry Potter series. The Bludgers were originally called Blooders, and it was really fascinating learning the origin of the Golden Snitch. So originally, the Golden Snitch was actually a bird. That's the bird right there on the back. A bird called the Golden Snidget that they played in the match, but the wizards thought it was too cruel to the birds. So instead, they crafted a golden ball with wings that copies the flight patterns of this Golden Snidget. And so that's how the Golden Snitch came to be. So it's really fascinating. I highly recommend this book to anyone who's read Harry Potter, if you haven't read it already. It really adds a lot to the Harry Potter world. Yeah, this is actually a reread because I did read it, but that was very many years ago, so I forgot most about it. And I'll give this one a 9 out of 10 as well. Next, I have The Alloy of Law by Brandon Sanderson. This is the 4th book in the Mistborn series. So I read the original Mistborn trilogy about a year ago, and I did really enjoy those. They definitely weren't perfect, like they weren't the greatest books of all time. They aren't like on that list of my top 10 favorite books or whatever, but they were really good and I did really enjoy them, and that led me into reading some of Sanderson's other books, such as the Stormlight Archive and some of his novellas, like Tress of the Emerald Sea. That was a good one. You'll remember me talking about the Stormlight Archive on this channel. I've read the first 3 books in the Stormlight Archive, and I did really enjoy those first 2 books, but the 3rd book was incredibly slow-paced and basically had me yawning the entire time, so I'm kind of taking a break from the Stormlight Archive before diving into the 4th book. But in the meantime, I figured I would read some more of the Mistborn series. So this is the Alloy of Law. This takes place 300 years after the events in the original Mistborn trilogy, and by this time, the world of Scadrial has evolved a lot into much like our modern world. They have cars, they have railways, they have trains, they have guns, and it's really, it's a really unique idea. Sanderson had a really unique idea to make, a fantasy world into a modern world with guns and stuff. I think that's a unique idea, although I don't prefer that idea. I'd rather prefer medieval fantasy, which is, how most of the fantasy books are written. I don't want to read a fantasy book that has guns in it, that has, railways and trains, and it's basically like a modern world, only there's magic. And the magic system is really great in these books, too. I don't have time to talk about it in depth, but it's a really great and well-thought-out magic system that Sanderson did. But, so, about this actual book, I did very much enjoy it, but I didn't enjoy it as much as that original trilogy. I feel like there were moments in this book that were supposed to land hard that, for some reason, for me, just didn't land very hard on me. And, the villain, the main villain, I'm not going to say his name because that's a spoiler, but we don't know that he's the villain until later on, and I feel like we could have known more about him before we found out that he was the villain, because, we hear his name mentioned a couple times, and I think we even see him a couple times before we find out that he is a villain, but I definitely feel that we could have known him more before we found out that he was a villain. Otherwise, that would have made the reveal land more hard. Overall, this was a pretty enjoyable book, but just not as good as that original trilogy. And I didn't really like the fact that they had guns in a fantasy world. But it was still an entertaining read, so I'll give it a 7 out of 10. And then, these last 3 books are ones that I didn't really enjoy that much. These 3 books from yonder glen. Anyway, so, these last 3 books on this list I did not enjoy that much. They were okay. This one was pretty okay. But this book is The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. So this is a prequel to the Hunger Games trilogy. The main character is Coriolanus Snow as a teenager, who in the Hunger Games trilogy is actually the main villain, so he becomes the villain later on. And this takes place 65 years before the Hunger Games trilogy. And this is President Snow's backstory. This is the villain's backstory. And this book was definitely very interesting, learning the origin of the Hanging Tree song, and the origin of a lot of other stuff as well, and this was definitely an entertaining read, but the pacing was kind of weird. It felt like in some places it was going by too quickly, and in some places it was going by way too slowly. And there were plot holes that I noticed. Well, I'm not sure if this one is necessarily a plot hole, because who knows, I could have missed something. Let me know in the comments. Overall, this was an enjoyable book, but I had a lot of problems with it, especially at the ending. So here there are a few specific things that I want to talk about. So if you haven't read this book and you don't want to be spoiled for it, because there will be spoilers here, and if you don't want to be spoiled for this book and you want to read it, then you can skip to this time in the video. So last warning, here's the spoiler section. So I noticed a plot hole, and I'm not sure exactly if it was a plot hole, because who knows, I could have missed something. But, well, first of all, Clemencia, I think that's her name, if I'm remembering right. When Clemencia gets bitten by the snake, it seems as though she is slowly turning into a snake, but then all of a sudden, it was halfway through the book, or maybe a little more, when Coriolanus went off to that other place, when we just never hear about Clemencia again and never hear if she healed. It sort of seems like the author actually forgot about her in the space of writing this book. And then, when they dump the snakes in the arena, and the snakes bite the children, and a lot of them die, how come they didn't slowly turn into snakes like Clemencia did, since, you know, she got bitten by those same snakes? Or how come Clemencia just didn't immediately drop dead like all those other people who were bitten by the snakes? And who knows, I may have missed something, but that is a plot hole that I noticed, but I may have missed something. Let me know in the comments. And then the ending, I would have ranked this book higher if the ending had been better. The ending was supposed to land hard, and it didn't. But then, so Coriolanus and Lucy Gray. Lucy Gray abandons Coriolanus, and Coriolanus thinks that she betrayed him, which is a possibility, but we don't really know that for sure. And then there's a snake that bites him when he goes off looking for her, which presumably she set that snake off to bite him since she's basically a snake whisperer. But then it turns out the snake wasn't venomous. So, like, was she trying to kill him or not? Is she bad or not? And then we never see her again or hear of Lucy Gray again. And this was so frustrating to me because, like, we don't even know if she's bad or good in the end, and we never hear from her again. And I was just very disappointed by the ending. So, spoiler section is over. I was very disappointed by the ending. I was a little disappointed by this book. But the writing style did not improve, and the songs that they sang in this book were just making me cringe because it felt like with the lines, I'm sorry, but Susan Collins is not a very good poet. Because it felt like in these songs, the author just kept on trying to make the, each line rhyme with the other one. Like, so the author would just choose a random word that rhymed with the other one. And it just felt very clunky to me. So I did not enjoy the songs in this book. They were very clunky. And the dialogue was not the best either, nor was the writing style. It did not improve. In fact, I think it might have even gotten... I think it might even be worse than in the Hunger Games trilogy. Some of the dialogue and the prose. So, yeah, I did not enjoy the writing style of this book. This was still an overall enjoyable book. Just the ending kind of ruined it for me. The pacing was kind of strange. And the writing style was weird, so... I'll probably give this one a 6 out of 10. And then, the final book in the Hunger Games trilogy that I read, Mockingjay. The final book in the Hunger Games trilogy. I did not enjoy this book. I mean, okay, so there were moments in this book that I did genuinely enjoy, but the writing style did not improve at all, and just... the pacing was so weird. Like, I remember I was 200 pages into this book, and I felt like nothing had happened, and yet at the same time I felt like too much had happened. There were some areas where it was going by too slowly, and other areas where it was going by too quickly for me to process. And the ending was just kind of lame, honestly. The way this series was resolved, in my opinion, was just very lame, it felt like to me. And there were a lot of parts in this book that were supposed to make you feel emotional, and yet none of them made me feel emotional. The only part in this book where I did feel emotional was just Katniss lying in bed for days, weeping over her life, what the Capitol has done to her, and yes, I feel so bad for Katniss, what she had to go through, how cruel this government is. I feel really bad for Katniss, but then, like... So, this book was also very forgettable. Like, I can only remember the first part and the last part, and vaguely some of the stuff in between, and I feel like if someone asked me to summarize this book, I could not do it. And I certainly could not do it accurately. I would get stuck in places. I would get confused as to where certain things go, because it's all just a jumbled mess in my mind. This book definitely felt very, very rushed. And the author definitely could have put more time and work and effort into this book. So I did not enjoy this book that much, unfortunately, and I'll have to give it a 4 out of 10. I feel like this book could easily have been split into 2 books, and it's totally understandable why they split the movie adaptation into 2 parts. Then the last book on this list, the worst book that I read this month, is Poor Richard. So this is nonfiction. This is the story of Benjamin Franklin. And See, my parents, I didn't choose to read this. My parents assigned this to me. My parents say that I read too much fiction and that I need to read some nonfiction. So they assigned me this book to read, and I did not enjoy it. It was just so boring to me. But this is like a real history, but history is boring. This world is boring. I need fiction. I need fantasy. So I just did not enjoy this book. I'm not gonna rank it, like rate it. Of course, I didn't like it. I thought it was boring, but that just comes down to personal taste. I don't really read a lot of nonfiction. There are a lot of people who'd enjoy this book, but this is just my opinion, and my opinion is no less valid than yours. I just think history is boring, and I didn't like this book. So, those were all the books that I read this month, ranked from best to worst. Let me see. Adventures of Tom Bombadil, Perelandra, Silmarillion. Right. Here's the stack. These are all the books that I read this past month in May, from best to worst, best, and down here are the worst ones. You should let me know in the comments down below if you've read any of the books on this list and what you think of them, what your thoughts were on them. I'd be very interested to know. Now I want to talk about one book that I actually ended up DNFing. And if you're unfamiliar with the term, DNF stands for did not finish. It's all in the title, really. It means it's when you started a book, and for whatever reason you just decided to not finish it, just to set it aside. And that unfortunately happened with this book. Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. This is Brandon Sanderson's first published novel, and one that I've been meaning to read for a very long time, but unfortunately I ended up DNFing it. I had a hard time. I just wasn't very interested in any of the characters or any of the plot lines of any of the characters. I just didn't find interest in any of them. I got maybe 200 pages in and then DNF'd it because, like, it was just moving by really slowly from the beginning, and after still recovering from that third book in the Stormlight Archive, which was like 1,500 pages and incredibly, horrendously, painfully slow-paced, I just don't have the patience for Sanderson right now. Maybe once I've recovered from that book, then I'll find the energy to read this one again. I do want to end up actually reading this entire book someday soon, but unfortunately I ended up DNFing it. But maybe I will read the entire thing someday. Alright, so, that is not the end of the video, though. Something just fell down. That is not the end of the video, though. I do want to talk about some of the books that I'm currently reading and some of the books that I do want to read this next month. Because I had someone comment telling me to share my TBR, which I don't do TBR piles. I go into the month with a few specific books that I want to read, but I don't put too much pressure on myself because I feel like that kind of takes away the joy of reading. So I just read what I feel like reading. But I do not have all those books on this desk right here, so let me go grab them in a minute. I'll be right back. Alright, I'm back. I have the books. I am reading a lot of books currently. At this moment, I'm reading 4 or 5. I am reading 5 books at this moment, all at the same time. So I want to talk about a few of them that I'm currently reading. First on the stack of books that I'm currently reading is Shadows of Self by Brandon Sanderson. This is the 5th book in the Mistborn series, so this is the sequel to The Alloy of Law. I'm that far in. I'm on chapter 6, page 113. Now the first 50 pages of this book were very exciting, but then the story just kind of slowed down, and right now it's going by really slowly, and it needs to speed up. Obviously I'm not going to judge this book. I'm not going to say the entire thing is slow-paced, because I'm only 100 pages in, but it's moving along a little slowly, definitely more slowly than The Alloy of Law, so it needs to speed up. I don't want to end up DNFing this one. Even if it does end up being slow-paced, I do want to make it all the way through because I do want to finish the Mistborn series. Then I'm also currently reading The Fall of Numenor by J.R.R. Tolkien. I am on page 58, that far in. So this is a book that I've owned, that has been in my possession for 7 months, and I have not read it since then. But the reason for that, you see, I started this book, and I got maybe halfway through, then I let my friend borrow it, and he kept it for a couple months. When he finally returned it, it just sat on my bookshelf for a few months, and for some reason I just never continued reading it. But I'm doing that now, and I'm starting over from the beginning, since I've probably forgotten a lot of the stuff that I read when I read about half of it, and I'm actually going to finish it this time. I'm going to finish this book. So this is basically all of Tolkien's Second Age writings. So there are 3 ages in Middle-earth, if you didn't know. The First Age, the Second Age, and the Third Age. For context, The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit take place at the very end of the Third Age. And the Silmarillion takes place primarily in the First Age. And The Fall of Numenor is all of Tolkien's Second Age writings put into one book. So Tolkien's writings about the Second Age of Middle-earth are scattered throughout his books, like the Silmarillion, in Unfinished Tales, and a whole bunch of others. And so Brian Sibley, who is a Tolkien expert, he took all of Tolkien's Second Age writings and put them together in chronological order in this book, so it reads like a novel, which is incredibly helpful, and so far I am very much enjoying it. I mean, I am only 58 pages in, but it's probably going to end up being a 10 out of 10, because so far I've ranked every Tolkien book that I've read like a 10 out of 10, except for those 2 that were an 11 out of 10. But so far I'm really enjoying it. And then, That Hideous Strength by C.S. Lewis. This is the 3rd and final book in the Space Trilogy. And it's a good deal longer than the first 2 books. This one's about 400 pages. How long is it, actually? 370 pages, so about 380 pages, probably. And so, I started this book halfway through the month. And I am on chapter 3, page 50. And I started it halfway through May. But the reason I'm only on chapter 3 is because it's very slow-paced. So, like, I'm not enjoying this as much as I enjoyed the first 2 books in this trilogy. This book is still good, but it's not near as good as those first 2 books in this trilogy yet. Of course, I'm only 50 pages in, and it's going by very slow-paced. There's just so many characters doing so many random things that have to do with, like, business, and most of that flies over my head because, you know, I'm under 18, of course. The only storyline that does interest me is Jane's storyline, and the vision that she had. So, I do want to end up finishing this book. I will finish this book. I had someone comment telling me that the first half of this book was very slow-paced, but once you get through that first half, it shouldn't be that hard to get through the second half, because the second half is much better than the first half. So long as I can get through that first half, I can finish the book, which I will hopefully do before the end of the month. I will not be reading it at the pace of 3 chapters every 15 days, but not enjoying it as much as the first 2 books in the trilogy, but overall, it's okay. Things just really need to speed up here. And then this one book that I've been meaning to read for such a long time, and that I did start in a different translation. My translation was very weird, and so I just ended up DNFing it 5 chapters in, but I'm picking it up again, and that is The Iliad by Homer. I'm borrowing this copy from a friend. This one is translated by Robert Fitzgerald. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. I'm probably not pronouncing his last name right. But so far, I'm on page 96, chapter 4, and this translation is immensely better than my other translation. And I'm definitely having a better time with it than the other translation. There are still some parts that bore me, like where it's just listing off all the people who are going off to battle, but as long as I can get through all that, it should be okay, and this translation is immensely better than the one I had before, so I will finish this book, and I do want to do a full review of it once I do finish it, so stay tuned for that. And also, the last book that I'm reading is another classic. It is Dracula by Bram Stoker. I think Bram Stoker is the person who, like, first invented the idea of vampires. I don't know really what to say about this book without giving away too much, but basically, it's about vampires. And so there's a vampire called Dracula, of course, and it is told in a very unique way. The story is told through a bunch of people's diaries and letters to each other, and I just think that that's really unique and fascinating and adds a really interesting touch to the story. So far, I am enjoying this book a lot. I am on page 102, chapter 8. And obviously, I can't say too much about it because, I am only 100 pages in, but so far, I am enjoying it so much. In fact, I think this might become one of my new favorite books if the rest of the book is as good as the first 100 pages were, because so far, I'm just enjoying this so much, and I do want to do a full review of this once I do finish it, so stay tuned for that as well. I'm really enjoying this book, and who knows, it may become one of my favorite books. So now that I've got those, I want to briefly talk about a couple of the books that I'm planning to read in this following month. Oh, look, you can see the stack there. Right. So the first book that I do want to read this month is Beowulf. Now, I already read Beowulf, but that was J.R. Tolkien's translation. This one is translated by John McNamara, and I am looking forward to reading this translation. It's only about 100 pages, and I really love Tolkien's translation of Beowulf, so hopefully I'll enjoy this translation of Beowulf as well. I just love the Beowulf story so much, so I'm looking forward to reading this one. I also do want to read The Great Divorce by C.S. Lewis. I know nothing about this book besides that it is theology, which C.S. Lewis wrote a lot of great and fantastic theology. So far, every book that I've read by C.S. Lewis, I have loved, so hopefully I'll love this book as well. It is pretty short. It's only about, Only about 150 pages, so I'm really excited to dive into this one. Also, I do want to reread The Hobbit. It has been a while since I've reread this, and I do want to because this is one of those books that first got me into reading, first introduced me to Tolkien, and it's just a very whimsical and delightful introduction to Middle-earth. Yet there is still a lot to it, and so I'm really looking forward to rereading this month. I mentioned earlier about the History of Middle-earth series that I was reading. I do plan to start Volume 10, Morgoth's Ring, which talks about how Tolkien wrote how Tolkien wrote the Silmarillion, and it has earlier drafts of the Silmarillion and all that. Really excited to start this book. I probably won't be able to finish it by the end of the month because I'm currently reading a lot of books, but I really am excited to get into this book. I will definitely start it this month, if not finish it. It also smells very fresh. I just love the smell of new books. And then also, I do want to end up starting, once I finish Shadows of Self, I do want to start The Bands of Mourning by Brandon Sanderson, which is the 6th book in the Mistborn series. There are 7 so far, but I do hear that Brandon Sanderson is writing an 8th one. Sorry about that, I just got interrupted there. So anyway, The Bands of Mourning by Brandon Sanderson. 6th book in the Mistborn series. I will start this book once I finish Shadows of Self, if I can get through it, of course, if the pace quickens up a bit. So I do want to read this book. I probably won't finish it. So. Alright, so that was all the books I read this past month, all the books that I'm currently reading, and all the books that I want to read this month. I figured that I should probably talk about the books that I'm currently reading and the books that I want to read, in addition to the books that I was talking about this month, which I haven't done before, but I'll definitely do that from now on. So, thank you so much for watching. Oh, I do want to tell you about one thing. So, I'm going to have an official schedule for this channel from now on. Tuesday mornings, if you're near or in my time zone, on Tuesday mornings I will upload a short, and every Friday morning, if you're in or near my time zone, I will upload a full video. So now I have a specific time for that. That starts now. I'm uploading this video on Tuesday. I will upload a short on Friday, a short the following Tuesday, and then I'll go to my regular schedule. So expect a short on Friday, and expect a short every Tuesday and a video every Friday from now on. Just wanted to let you know about that. So thanks so much for watching, and for now, farewell.